You're watching EVH and Gear TV, brought to you by Stewart Travel Guitars. See the incredible stowaway travel guitar at stewartguitars.com. Microphones for EVH and Gear TV are provided by Rode Microphones. And official Van Halen merchandise is provided by vanhalenstore.com. Here's your host from Ontario, Canada, EVH artist Eric Broadbent.
Hey everyone, it is the weekend. Happy Friday to you all. Welcome to EVH and Gear TV. We are live once again, and joining us this evening is a familiar face from not only a Canadian band Toque, but you might have seen him on that Slash Guys tour, Mr. Todd Kerns. Todd, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for accommodating us this evening. I mean, I know you're on a tour. You're on a break today, day off. Sitting in a hotel. Where are you right now?
Technically, I think it's called Prior Lake, Minnesota.
Okay. All right. There you go.
I think it's south of Winnipeg. I assume it's something like that, yeah.
Okay.
By Canadian standards, I don't know.
There you go. Everything. Now, where's the closest Tim Hortons? There isn't. There.
That I don't know, actually.
When you
seek that out.
When you do the Canadian legs, you kind of point. Okay, I know there's a Tim Hortons over here. I remember back in the old days, when the Tim Hortons were just kind of getting really licensed. We'd route according to Tim Hortons. It was great.
Totally, yeah. It's funny because they are popping up all over the planet. We've seen them in like crazy places like Dubai.
Really?
Yeah, it's fascinating. We were driving in Dubai one day, and there was a huge building, like a huge skyscraper with a Tim Hortons ad up the side of it, and I just looked at Brent Fitz like what? Like, am I as jet lagged as I feel, or is that not a Tim Hortons ad in the middle of the Middle East to some degree, almost pretty much?
Yeah, like you're really craving a coffee. Like I thought it was weird about 10 years ago when I drive over to Michigan. I had a buddy in Michigan there, Port Huron, and I go over there and there was a couple, actually maybe one Tim Hortons that popped up. I'm like, yeah. Wow. And now I know they're getting more popular. And I mean, I also remember in that same time, Dunkin' Donuts was the equivalent to what we have back here.
Totally.
And I don't think the coffee was near as good. And, the donuts were questionable. But when you're a band, you're playing a gig at 3 o'clock in the morning, any coffee and donut kind of feels pretty good.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Well, it's funny because I think there's one I'm quite certain there's one in Manhattan, too. Like it's become almost sort of super commonplace, where it used to be a straight up like Canadian mirage. Now it's sort of like, I assume that eventually it'll be pretty much everywhere.
I agree. I saw something really funny. One of my friends shared this meme on Facebook the other day. I'm sure you can appreciate this because now they're doing the the Beyond Meat burgers and all that kind of stuff, and which I'm in favor of because my better half here, Sandra, she's switched to that kind of a diet, and I like them a lot too. I like it better than beef.
Sure,
they're phenomenal.
Me too.
Yeah, they're good. But he said Tim Hortons is one. What is it? They're just missing a clown and a cramp from being McDonald's. I thought that was pretty funny,
Yeah, they are selling burgers now, so that is kind of a fascinating thing. Yeah,
it is. But anyways, let's talk about some really cool things here. We're going to jump over to the chat and say hi to a whole bunch of really fun people that are here to ask you a lot of questions. But
that's exciting.
You had an amazing experience you shared with me by text a few minutes ago. Before the show tonight, you had a little bit of a tour, and I don't even want to preface it. I want to let you tell us about where did you go this evening?
We went to Paisley Park. This is my wristband that they gave me.
Oh man!
It was I've been wanting to go there for so long, and it just sort of like I'm so bad at like American geography, as bad as I am at pretty much geography. But I kind of like someone mentioned it like this morning. They said sort of that hey man, Paisley Park's not far from there, and I go no way really. So through like a few finagling phone calls and whatnot, myself, Miles Kennedy, Frank Sidoris and his wife, we all went out to Paisley Park, and it was really overwhelming, to be honest, and bizarrely emotional for me because, it's funny because I've been to places like, I've been to the Louvre, I've seen the Mona Lisa, and when you're there, you're kind of like, this isn't like you've seen the image of the Mona Lisa your entire life, but when you go, that's it, that's the Mona Lisa, you're like, oh wow, it's a trip. But I'm not equating like Prince's outfits or guitars to the Mona Lisa, sure. But it is a trip to have looked at, and I'm a massive fan, so to have been in, to seen his Hohner Telecaster that he played all those years, or those cloud guitars, or the crazy Prince cymbal guitars, and And then to see them in person and go, that's the guitar from Purple Rain, and that's the guitar from this, and to see all the outfits, and then like I was blown away by the facility of Paisley Park. I mean, we're talking about A, B, C, D, 4 proper working recording studios.
Wow.
Yeah, and then this huge like 1,500 person soundstage, like a live concert venue, basically. And then you can take into account there's a live media room, there's editing bays, and then of course that's his house too. So it just made me like go like what more could a guy want, you know? And all I ever wanted was to have a basement where I could set some drums up and amps and have friends come over and jam,
Man cave.
And he basically did the same thing, but like
a bit more of a budget.
To that next level.
Yeah.
So I was really blown away by it. And like I said, it was pretty overwhelming. And Miles and I, we rode back together, and we were both talking about, it actually kind of, it had a different effect on him. It kind of bummed him out. Like he had this kind of, this feeling of like, because you just think, wow, what an immense talent. What a terrible loss, you know? And I definitely I've been through that a few times already with him, but I think if anything, I was almost more inspired, or more kind of like, I think guys like Prince, like a lot of musicians, it comes in like two parts where it kind of, you feel inspired and you also feel like never picking up the guitar again.
I know.
You feel like I'll never be able to do this. But I think that's part of the fun is it lights a fire under you that I'm sure if Prince was around, he would say, you shouldn't stop playing guitar because of me. If anything, he's hoping you'll be inspired enough to go and woodshed and lock yourself in the basement and come up with some songs or whatever,
I agree. And it's one thing, like you go to the hard rock cafes around the world. I know you've been probably to countless on tours, hitting all the various hard rock cafes, and you see like Eddie Van Halen's guitar, or you'll see Prince's this, or you'll see David Gilmour's Strat or something, or some of the Kiss outfits, that kind of stuff. But I mean, you just don't really know. I mean, as you know, like it could be like something that maybe Ace Frehley wore one time in a rare thing or whatever. I mean, it could just be a backup suit. You never know the full logistics of it. But being at Prince's studio, where his home, like as you say, he lived there, recorded there. I mean, that stuff is authentic. It's just got to almost speak to you. Just even if you don't have a conversation with, like you were there with Miles and the other guys. Yeah. I mean, even if you're not having a conversation with one another, it's almost like you're conversing with the atmosphere there.
Yeah, and it's the closest you'll ever get to being. I never got to see Prince live. One of the biggest problems I've had my whole life is almost a good problem to have, because I have always performed and played and toured so much that I've gone long periods without being able to see any shows because I'm always on stage, or I'll be away and, oh, you missed Stevie Wonder, and oh, you missed this and that, and I'm like, it was kind of like one of those things. It was a bummer, but I was out doing my thing, and then I can't really call that a negative.
No, of course,
So
that's right.
Prince is one of those ones that got away from me. I was always that kind of like, I'll see him next year, and then all of a sudden, this is why more than ever, I've never seen the Eagles, and it's like, now Glenn's gone, and I'm like, damn, dude, I never saw Fleetwood Mac, and I know no one's gone yet, but it's, there's these moments, the Stones, like I'm going, damn, dude, we gotta go. I've seen Keith solo, which is one of my all-time like top 5 favorite shows of all time. But I've never seen the Stones live because I'm always, like I say, I'm always away. I'm currently in Minnesota, so I'm, but again, it's a good problem to have. But, all of our heroes aren't getting any younger, and we have to do these things. We have to see these people while we can.
I agree. Like some of those things, like you mentioned, especially like the Stones, you could put Fleetwood Mac in there. You could put the Eagles in there as well, too. They're very iconic things. It's almost, I don't want to really, really take it to the next level, but like watching the man land on the moon, you remember where you were, when we first landed on the moon, if there's some conspiracy theorists, I think that didn't happen, but I believe it happened. A lot of us believe it happened, but we remember where we were, right? And my brother-in-law, he got to see Jimi Hendrix live, and I thought, like, wow. I mean, and my better half's cousin saw Van Halen play London Gardens, London, Ontario, back in '78. I mean, that is a historic thing. But let's forget about those ones for a second. Let's talk about like the Rolling Stones. If that is historic to be there. I mean, it'd be really, really cool back in the day. Maybe seeing the Beatles, all these different things where if you don't act on it, and in your case, of course, you couldn't because you're on the road. But you have to take a chance and go see some of these things.
Well, a friend of mine, he when he was a little kid, he's probably, I don't know how old he is, but he's older than I am. But he told me a story of how his older sister took him to see the Beatles at like Maple Leaf Gardens or something like that.
Oh,
And I was
man.
like, what? Those are the kind of stories, like, as a person like me who's such a music nerd, that just like, you know, it's a bizarre thing to try and even like wrap my head around, you know. But I have friends that have seen Led Zeppelin, they saw Jimi Hendrix, they saw, you know, and I'm always like, whoa, what? Like, you saw that stuff? You know, that trips me out. Like, because it's to us who really love rock and roll and love music, that stuff is myth. It is legend. You know what I mean? And it always will be for me. It's just that's the way I'm wired. You know what I mean?
At the same time, it's kind of cool too. If you think, I know you don't probably think about this often, but there's fans that, you know, loved Guns N' Roses, they love Slash, and they're coming out to see you play. And I mean, you have a massive following. You're just yourself. I mean, forget about Slash. I mean, and Miles Kennedy, like both those entities have their own massive followings, but you do have a nice social media following. People are diehard fans.
Yeah.
I've got comments coming from around the world about you. And
Oh, that's awesome.
so the same thing. It's the same thing. I'm not putting you on the platform of the Beatles and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, people are doing anything they can to get there to see you, and that's got to be a pretty cool feeling too.
You know, what's really interesting to me, because I had this conversation not that long ago, and I said, you know, what's really weird is when I was pretty young, probably in my early 20s, I remember having this conversation with a kid who came up to me, and he said, dude, you're the reason I play guitar, or something like that. And I was like, what? How can that possibly be? I've only been doing this for, you know, however long.
Mm-hmm.
And he told this story of my band at the time opening for like Haywire, the Canadian band, in like at a little arena in like Cranbrook, BC, or some town like that.
Mm-hmm.
He just sort of whatever connected with me and thought, I want to do what that guy's doing. And this is like years before the age of electric. So I was like 18, you know, whatever. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting, because I know that every time we step on stage, Slash has, you know, been doing this for years. He's been a Johnny Appleseed of like, kids go, they see that, or they hear him and they go, I want to do that, and they pick up a guitar. So it's never lost on me the importance of just, you know, playing music and going from town to town, and you know, you have this effect on people, for better or worse, but you hope for better, that people see you and they decide, I want to play guitar. I want to do what that guy's doing, you know? And so even though like I would never lump myself in with Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, or Steven Tyler, or whoever you want to throw in that pile, in my own little way, I feel like, you know, if nothing else, I've tried to kind of present playing music as, you know, as just nothing but joyful and fun, and you can actually turn it into a career and make a really good life for yourself. It doesn't mean it's easy, but nothing is. You know what I mean?
That's right. Anything that comes easy is you know, not really worth it. You have to work at it for sure.
That's generally true.
Yeah. No, it's nice. It is a very nice, warm and fuzzy feeling when someone comes up and says, I picked up the guitar because of you, or I bought this bass because of you, or, you know, that kind of thing. It's very, very cool.
It's always surreal to me, because I'm always kind of like, what, me?
I know.
I think of myself so much more blue collar, in the sense that I just love playing music. You know, it's not really about I even like the idea of fame or fortune and all that kind of stuff. To me, it was like, I remember being on the road, starving, sleeping on people's floors, you know, making peanut butter and jam sandwiches out of like, you know, whatever we could do to survive. And I never once thought, you know, this is bad, or this is something I don't want to do. If anything, I remember just kind of being like, isn't this great? You know, and I had a lot of friends fall off of that lifestyle, going, you know, back and getting jobs and having families and deciding to be real normal people. And I was like, you know, I never looked at that as a negative. I mean, that's part of the process. So, and if anything, it sort of convinces you to keep staying the course, I suppose, you know, and I'm still here, you know, so it's kind of like, it's a funny thing that, you know, you just kind of keep doing what you do, and things just kind of work themselves out in one way or another.
Exactly. One of the things I thought was really neat too, over the past probably 2 years, I've featured quite a few bassists on the show, oddly on a guitar kind of themed channel. I've had recently, obviously, Billy Sheen, I told you about. Billy was on here last week. But way back, about a year and a half back, 2 years back, I had Rudy Sarzo on the show. And he kind of gave us a really cool idea? Like I asked him, I said, like, okay, what was your idea getting into bass? Like, what was your future? Like, what was your grand scheme? And he said, and I look at him as a chameleon, and I'm sure you would agree too. That guy can just fit into any. It's like he just goes into any band from John Fogerty to anybody. Like, I mean, he can just fit, right? And
Absolutely.
all he wanted to do was just make enough money that he could put food on the table for his family and continue to play his instrument. But he was able to adapt, and that's what continued to provide him these gigs. And I kind of look at you that way a lot too, because I mean, you just seem to, no matter who you work with, you fit. Now, how do you approach different gigs as you go to them? I mean, from Slash to Toque, which is a completely different thing, and a lot of the other things you've worked on over your career. How do you go approach a new band and immediately? I know it's not easy by any means, but how do you find that path to just kind of be there without being overbearing?
What's funny for me is because when I think about Rudy, I mean, I absolutely agree. But Rudy's such a special guy and such a special talent. For me, it's almost more bizarre because during the course of my life and my year to year, or sometimes month to month, and sometimes week to week, I am wearing completely different hats. Yeah. So I play bass with Slash, and people always go like, when did you switch to bass? And I go, well, I actually started playing bass. I was a kid playing in bands with much older guys. When I was a kid, no one wanted to play bass.
Right, of course.
It was kind of like everybody was a guitar player, everybody was a drummer, and then you always had some showboat that wanted to be the lead singer.
Yeah.
And I happened to own a Gibson EB3. My father decided I had an acoustic Epiphone. It's called an Epi. It was like the affordable, and I was getting around on that thing a little bit. And I remember him saying, well, you've got a guitar. We should probably get you a bass guitar. I don't know what his bizarre reasoning was. It just sort of like, my father's just such a character that way. So I remember we walked into this store in Edmonton, which is interesting because we're from Saskatchewan, but we were out visiting family. And we were kind of like on the fence between this Gretsch semi-hollow body, of which I don't know the name of. It's the one that, I don't know if you remember, like Roy Clark or even Rick Springfield used to play one back in the in the 80s. And it was this or this Gibson EB3 bass. And I remember thinking like, I was young enough that I was kind of like, I knew the name Gibson, and I knew that carried a lot of weight.
Sure.
And I was like, well, that's pretty rad, And I think my dad just decided, you've got a guitar. Why get another guitar? An electric guitar. Hello. That would have been like an obvious thing to have.
Yeah.
So he got me this bass. And then suddenly, everybody wanted me to be in their band because no one wanted to play bass. Like, everybody was a guitar player. And so I was like, okay. And I was playing with guys way older than me, like way older. So I was barely getting around on it, which is, I think, in a lot of ways is the best thing you can do.
Yes.
Because you're like, you have to advance so much quicker. You have to get as good as you can so much quicker. And, and from there it becomes like, then they start making you sing, hey, sing this. And you go, okay. And the next thing they know, they start to go, he can sing the high songs. Hey, you're singing this now. And the next thing you know, you're like, I didn't want to be the lead singer.
I know.
It's funny you say that about Rudy because I felt the same way. I just wanted to be in a band. I just loved rock and roll. I loved music. I loved the idea of just being on stage and jumping around and the whole thing. I was just in love with the entire thing. So I would have played the tambourine if somebody would have had me. You know what I mean? So then the next thing I knew, it was just playing in bands and I was singing and then I was always playing guitar at the same time because I was just obsessed with music and wanted to play this and that. And then when my brother became old enough to play in a band together, he was a bass player. He just followed right in my footsteps, and it was just kind of like, okay, you play bass, I'll be the rhythm guitar lead singer guy, and that's when that sort of happened. So there's this bizarre thing when we talk about Rudy and all these gigs. In my world, it is like playing bass here, playing guitar there, being a singer over here. So I'm kind of like playing bass, singing, playing guitar in multiple different things, but if I had chosen one path, say I'm just a bass player, then I would have 3 times less work.
Exactly.
Because I'm coming from this, going to a Toque run where I'm the lead singer, guitar player, And then I come back to Vegas and I sit with my friends that rating the Rock Vault, and I'm just a singer.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating to me because people have known me in various versions of this. Todd as the lead singer guy, Todd as a guitar player, Todd as a bass player. And so many of them don't know that the other one exists. So they're always kind of like, so weird seeing you without a guitar, or it's so weird seeing you with a guitar instead of a bass. And I'm like, to me, it's music, and I love music so much that if someone will let me play drums, I will bash the hell out of a drum kit for them. You know what I mean? So to me, it's like I think I love music so much that it's like if someone says, you know, come play guitar in this, I go, absolutely, let's go do that. You know, and I think all you can really do is just do your best, and I think that that's probably the only thing I can say as any form of advice is just go in there with the most enthusiasm and positive attitude and just play your heart out, you know. And if it doesn't mean, look, when guys like Eddie Van Halen come along, the bar is set so high that it's either like no one should ever pick up the guitar ever again. We should all just never. The music should just stop. You know, it's like, but that's not reality because there's always going to be different kinds of guitar players. Keith Richards, Johnny Ramone. You know, like and to me, they're all so. You can't imagine the palette of music being without all of these people. To me, so it's great and everything that you know that there's some real. You know, skilled guitar players out there, at least in that sense of the world. Technical, I think, is the word I'm looking for. Technical guitar players. Yes. And there's other, like Neil Young. When I watch Neil Young live, I've seen Neil many times, and when he goes for a solo, it is the most primal thing you'll ever see. And I'm like, well, God, I don't want to watch him suddenly, like, you know, I don't know, like, pull off an Yngwie Malmsteen solo. It's like, that would be totally ludicrous.
That's
you know?
right.
So, but I love that kind of stuff, and I think, you know, to me, it's just kind of like I just approach everything, whether it's singing or playing guitar or playing bass, and I just try to do my best. And you know, if you're looking for a funk slap style bass player, I'm not your guy. Yeah. If you're looking for Eddie Van Halen on guitar, I'm not your guy. You know, so I do what I do, and I think I also bring the vocals with me, which you'll see in the Slash band and stuff like that. That you know, whatever I'm doing, I also, if I'm singing backups or singing whatever, I can carry a tune on the vocals too. So that's part of my arsenal in terms of the overall presentation, as it were.
A lot brought to the table for sure. Well, one of the things that you said that was paramount, I think, is the fact that you played with people that were much older than you. And I'm going to guess, what, 10 to 15 years older than you, maybe even more when you started out?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It actually got older. Like, it started off with high school friends, and then guys out of high school, and I was still in high school, you know, and then just sort of like it became more and more like a 5-year difference, then a 10-year difference, and a 15-year difference, and you know, it's funny how that happens. And every time you are kind of like playing catch up to the other, to the most talented guy in the band. Yeah.
I've always said, there's a little piece of advice I try to offer on my different shows is like, surround yourself with greatness. It will make you better. And as a young guitar player myself in my teens, I had twin sisters that were 10 years older than me, and they both dated bass players. Right. But when I say bass players, they were well-gifted. Well, one of them was a well-gifted guitarist as well, too. One was just a phenomenal Jocko bass player. I mean, just like Jocko. And, I mean, man, as a young brother, I'm like, you know, I don't care what it takes to make this relationship work with your boyfriends. Just stay with these guys forever because they're teaching me everything, right? And, and I learned so much from them. But, you know, the one time, I remember one of them dated a guitar player, so I'm practicing at my dad's. My dad had an airport, so we practiced in his hangar where they kept the airplanes and stuff. Totally noisy. And I'm in there practicing with the guys, 3-piece band. And then, you know, the boyfriend would come in, and he'd be like 20 years older than me, I guess we'll say. And he'd say, can I plug in? Can I try for a second? I'm like, yeah, sure. And just totally destroyed, right? I mean, destroyed me and, you know, just crushed me. But at the same time, too, like, you know, I'm pretty much put down like right to the curb in front of my bandmates, and I'm like, I can't have that happen again. And that inspiration, instead of being mad and saying, you know what, I was mad, but I didn't give up, and I channeled that energy. And next practice, I was like pulling off a couple of the riffs that he did, not as good as him, but the guys were like, oh, cool, man, and you could just see that mutual kind of, yeah, I get it.
Well, it's you know, it's a different thing because, you know, when you are 20 years younger than somebody, they should be better than you, or they should have more experience than you in so many other ways. So to me, it was always kind of like, yeah, sometimes you get your ass handed to you, but it's a good lesson to learn in whatever way to make you kind of go, okay, that's it. I'm going to go back to the woodshed and just really kind of figure this out. But I also was never really, like, when it came to music, I was never really dissuaded by the fact that I couldn't play, like, Eddie Van Halen and all that followed. To me, it was kind of more like, there has to be those guys, but there's also has to be these other guys. So I just sort of went, that I suppose if I sat in my basement or in my bedroom for the rest of my life, just shredding and shredding and shredding, I might have been able to kind of go there. But it wasn't necessarily wasn't my thing. You know what I mean? And I think music is such a great, vast thing that there's lots of things. So you just got to find your thing.
That's right.
That's pretty much what I did.
I find now at my age, like, I'm 51 this year, and obviously, as I've told you off the air, and people that watch this channel know I'm a big Van Halen nut. And I think it's taken me 50 years plus to discover, like, not only, like, I am a major diehard Van Halen fan. I can't play the stuff note for note. I can play some things pretty good. I embellish some other things okay. But I've come to the realization, and it's a very comforting feeling, that I know I'm never going to do it. And I don't want to take that the wrong way to tell people, like, just give up. But, but don't, like, spend all your time focused on one thing. And I know I sound like a hypocrite saying this, but with the day that you realize it, whether it's like 2 years into playing, 2 weeks into playing, or, in my case, probably 35 years of playing, it's a nice, comforting feeling to know that, okay, have fun with it. Get as close as you can if you want, if that's your thing, if you're chasing it. But at the same time, try to discover your own thing. And the minute that you do, as you know, it's such like, where'd that come from? You watch some videos back, maybe let's say one of the Slash shows. Maybe you guys take an extended jam, and some fan records it, and it's kind of something you normally don't do, and you watch it back. What the heck was I doing there? That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a very. I
had a different sense of the inspiration of it too, because I really wasn't that interested in trying to, like, learn songs as much when I was young. Like, we played in cover bands and whatnot, so you had to learn songs, and that's kind of the way it was. I started in, like, playing, like, high school dances and whatever the popular songs were. That's kind of what we would do.
Of course.
But at the same time, I almost sort of think that we should take that kind of inspiration, rather than spending all of our time learning how to play things note for note per se. Even though that is a great practice, and it does a lot for your brain, and it does a lot for your musical ear and all that kind of stuff, it's almost more like taking that same kind of inspiration and channeling it into creative stuff for yourself, like coming up with your own stuff. And that's what really kind of separates everything anyways. You can be the best, take your pick, Eddie Van Halen clone in the world, but until you kind of come up with your own song and your own ideas, you're kind of basically just going to be an Eddie Van Halen impersonator, you know what I mean? And Eddie Van Halen is, again, he's another one of those people, like so many, well, actually anybody in Van Halen, are such a one-of-a-kind thing, like, it's like there really was no one before Eddie Van Halen. We all know that the wheel was completely reinvented in that moment when we all first heard whatever your first Van Halen experience was. I assume yours was the first album, like mine.
No, actually, it wasn't. I'll share it. I'll share it in a second. But continue with your story.
The funny thing is this, dude. I was so young that I remember. The cool guy with the big car driving by, and Eruption was playing at, like, maximum volume. In my memory, it sounded like an airplane was landing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? To the point that I didn't even in my little brain equate that was a guitar. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really understand what I was hearing, So, but how could I really? I mean, at the time, I think if somebody had said, check out this guitar player, and then pressed play or put the needle on, I would have been like, whoa, that guy's insane. But I think just hearing that noise swooping down the road in the Doppler effect of the travel and everything was a super transcendent thing. So that when we finally, when I went over to somebody's basement there, and then they went, check this out, and that whole thing was just like, dude, my friends, Slash included, and another friend of mine, they went to Cal Jam or whatever concert it was. It was Aerosmith and blah, 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 blah. and this new band called Van Halen.
Mm-hmm.
And they all tell the story of how Aerosmith was in a terrible state, like they were just in that real terrible heroin,
dark times,
dark place, and they got their asses handed to them by this young band from Pasadena called Van Halen, and to the point that no one had ever heard the record or anything like that. They just sort of like, this band walked on stage, which, 9 times out of 10, we've all been in the position where you're standing at a show and you here comes a band to come on stage that you've never heard of, and you're kind of like, oh, can we just get to the headliner, to Aerosmith? I'm waiting here. And they said they didn't know any of the songs, and that band came out and just leveled the place and changed the entire game forever. And they were like, everybody went out the next day and, well, where can I find this Van Halen band? And that's what, trying to live up to that is, it goes back to like guys like Prince or the bar's set super, super high, to the point that all the guys that followed Eddie, and there's a long list of guys that we all love and respect, you all have to go, yeah, but Eddie was first, you know what I mean? And Eddie, in many ways, to me, still possessed and possesses something that those guys never had. Like Van Halen always had something a little bit dangerous about them, and a little bit, like, even as refined as he was, there was something kind of unrefined about them too. Like, I suppose Dave brought a lot of that to it in those days.
For sure.
But even so, it was sort of like in retrospect, going back and hearing like "Dance the Night Away" or "Beautiful Girls," and I'm like, these are such like Jamie's Crying, and I'm like, these are like unapologetically super pop songs.
Oh, yeah.
They're just like, you can tell that those guys loved a good pop song. It just happens to have the Eddie Van Halen's just like, first of all, the tone alone.
Yep.
If you don't, like, without even talking about like his ability, his tone is like, to this day, everybody I know is still searching for that tone. Everybody I know is still.
Sound, that's right.
Did you know he used these tubes?
Yeah, I know.
Like out there trying
it's it's like folklore, like the Loch Ness Monster, right? It's like there's no definitive answer, and you can ask Eddie, and he'll give you 7 different answers. It could either be he forgot, or he just doesn't, or he wants to throw you off the path. Maybe,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the interesting part is, and I think that even the idea of like looking at how, when you sort of objectively look at it, you go, well, he's such a technical player. But then you look at it and you go, he is, but it's so gut from the gut, you know what I mean? And so the fact that his guitar is this, the Frankenstein is such a, you're like, what is going on with this thing? It looks like it's barely being held together. And I think that's part of the magic of Eddie Van Halen, is the fact that he was like, there's sort of like this Frankenstein's monster of a and it's just monolithic tone and just and an assault. And then when you surround it with his brother on drums and the whole thing was just like when you watch old Van Halen, it's easy to get kind of lost in like, in what it is and what it has been all these years. When you go back and you look at those early concerts, I go, there's nobody could touch these guys. These guys are the best band in the world at this moment, and it's an all-inclusive thing. David Lee Roth was one of a kind. He was and is still an original. You know what I mean? And,
I agreed. Well, it's funny. I've said this a million times in the show because I come from the era. You and I are pretty much the same age. I come from the Roth era. That's how I discovered Van Halen. And
too, yeah.
whether a fan likes David Lee Roth or not, they at least need to acknowledge this. I've said there are 3 elements, and there's probably more, but 3 key, if to have a good recipe for a nice cake or a nice way you cook a steak, there's a nice recipe that you follow. And to Van Halen's signature sound, I credit 3 elements, and that's especially that swing sound, because the early Van Halen had that swing. Like, I mean, a lot of musicians will know when they try to play that stuff, it's like, well, I can't find that groove. I just can't get it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, and tell me, and I'm going to say them in kind of out of context order, but you can tell me if you agree with me. Number 1 is the father, John Van Halen. With the big band sound that he had and all the work that he did years as a performing musician. Number 2, the fact that Eddie and Alex, for the most part, would get up in the morning before even having breakfast. It would be just guitar and drums and no bass player in the house, or no one would come over. It would just, so they had to fill that void. And then number 3, David Lee Roth, basically inserting himself, not asked, not wanted, inserting himself into Van Halen. I'm going to be your guy. And then on top of that, bringing this repertoire. I mean, David Lee Roth has got more soul in that man's body. I mean, I know he wants to be a black man. He thinks. I think he thinks he is. And I mean that with the utmost respect, because he was bringing crowds together in those backyard parties. Remember how the police would be called, and they'd come to these parties, and there'd be a Spanish, black, white, Asian, everything would come together, and they melded. But I guess what my point is, he brought this swing to the band that without him, I don't think we would have ever had.
I think in retrospect, that is so much more apparent to me. Like, you're absolutely correct, because I think in a lot of ways Alex gets overshadowed
by Eddie,
and of course by the personality of David Lee Roth. We rarely do have anybody. Actually, Brent Fitz is one of those people who just is an absolute devotee to Alex Van Halen, and I go, dude, when you hear Alex play the drums, you go, that's Alex Van Halen, and I think that's a big part of where that swing is coming from, because I think you're right. I think those kids grew up in a house where that music has just been a part of them since they were infants. You know what I mean? It's just kind of, that swing thing is there, and with a different singer, I don't think they would have been able to channel that sort of old school. Like Dave brings this kind of Sammy Davis Jr. meets, like an old, like Vegas big band show thing to it that you never would have really, because of what it was, because of Van Halen being this big long hair heavy metal rock band. You don't think about it until enough time has gone by, and I look back at it. His whole presentation is this big, larger than life game show host kind of thing, and he's, as my friend stated after seeing them at that festival, he said the other thing that was really stood out about Van Halen in this band that they'd never seen before or even heard of was that it was a festival, so every other band came out and did their thing, and this next song is called this, this next song is about this, and Dave came out there and was talking like, not, I was going to say soliloquies, but not soliloquies at all. Just talking like he was playing at the backyard party, like, hey, how's everybody? And he just has that thing. He has had it, and it's not something that can be taught. It is just something that Dave very naturally had, and still has, frankly. Because if you watch him on like his podcast or listen to one of his podcasts or anything like that, no one can go like this guy. He just goes and goes, and half the time I think we're all trying to keep up with the last joke while he's moving into the next one.
I know. And that's the thing. People sometimes complain. They'll say, I hate it when Dave's on his shtick. Dave doesn't have an off switch. There's no off. That's just, you love Dave or hate Dave, he's Absolutely. On. I think basically he put tape over the switch, and you just can't turn it off, and that's Dave, man.
Absolutely. And I think that's, and like you say, love it or hate it, I think it's an amazing thing. And I think he really, he changed the game. I mean, I felt like afterwards, like every rock band, especially the 80s heavy metal bands, everybody was trying to be Van Halen in their own way. Like, you had to have that guitar player, and your front man had to be this big, blonde, personality type guy. And there's a million examples of that. But I just think that, that was a mold that came out of nowhere. Although it's obviously, there's elements of Van Halen that are, inspiration from this and inspiration from that, and it sort of creates this thing. But after that, it was sort of like, well, that was it. They broke the mold. And when Sammy comes in, it's a completely different band. And you're on board or you're not. Yep. And I was always a David Lee Roth guy, but I always appreciated every time they came out with a new album with Sammy, because I've always been a huge appreciator of Sammy as a songwriter. Mm-hmm. And as people never really talk about, or they don't really, not never, but I was always like, I thought Sammy was great before he joined Van Halen. I was like,
of course, me too.
We all thought he was great.
Yeah.
But I always was a big appreciator of their everything that they put out. They always had a great single or whatever that came out. But I will always say that the initial Van Halen band had such an impact that it was impossible to compare. To me, for me anyway, that what that meant. How it meant on Monday there was nothing, and then on Tuesday there was this band called Van Halen. You know, and then it was like, and everything just changed. You know, it's like,
that's right.
So, and that's the best thing about it. To me, it's you know, mad respect all the way. Whether you like what they're doing now or you kind of understand a sort of more kinder, gentler Van Halen in their senior years or not, it's kind of like, it's one of those things where if you go back and watch those earlier tours or earlier concerts, it's just clear as day that why they were like crushing Black Sabbath or whoever they were opening for.
Destroyed.
Get these guys off the tour. They're killing us. You know?
Find any excuse you can. Find any excuse you can to throw them off the tour. You know, some guacamole gets thrown at Steve Perry and Journey. Get them off the tour. You know what I mean? Get them out.
Can you imagine? It's like, wow.
I know. Well, the thing is with David Lee Roth, and this will probably be our last discussion of Van Halen, but with David Lee Roth, he was that guy that didn't, like all of us as kids, you know, you growing up in Canada here, want to be a rock and roll musician, you probably had aspirations of being a star and a rock star, but David Lee Roth said, I'm going to be a rock star. I don't want to be a rock star. I'm going to be a rock star. I'm going to be your singer. In Van Halen was turned down multiple times. And he also knew, I think he knew that he probably wasn't the world's greatest singer. And of course, you know, ego can get away from you after a while, and he probably thought he was pretty good. I'm sure Dave doesn't think he's the world's greatest singer, and he certainly isn't. But what he brought, not only as a singer, it's one of those things where talk the talk and walk the walk and talk the talk. He was able to get by with his vocals and then channeled the charisma of the choreography, the dance and martial arts, swing, you know, the comedy. You add it all together, talk show Dave, and it just worked.
Yeah, and I think in its own way, it's sort of one of those things where, I don't know, I can't imagine Van Halen with a Steve Perry in it. I just wouldn't. Somebody who was like a clearly like, I mean, Steve is a gifted singer.
Sure.
When you hear songs on the radio, I always stop and go, I'm not even the hugest Journey fan, but I'll always stop dead in my tracks and go, man, what a voice, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of like, it's funny because when I say like, Eddie Van Halen was such a technical player that it almost kind of left me kind of like, well, I can't do that, you know. But then you looked at Dave and you went like, you know, well, I might be able to do something like that, you know, because Dave it was all attitude, you know, and it was like, I don't think you can really you can say that, well, Dave wasn't Steve Perry, but I go, who cares? David Lee Roth was David Lee Roth. It's like he had something that Steve will never have, you know what I mean? And it's kind of something you can't really put into words what Dave actually had, because it's such a packaged thing that anybody would have fired their singer to hire that guy. You know what I mean? If, at that time, you know.
Agreed. Well, it's funny, as we close up this segment, you asked me earlier, like you thought I would have kind of come into Van Halen around the first record, and I'd love to say, yeah, that'd be the magical answer, but no, it wasn't. I come in 3 records later. My cousin, who lived like just a stone's throw away from me in the country, here in a small town, Ontario, Canada, rural, by the way, too. His brother the brothers and sisters had records all over the place, and I went down to his house one day, and he's playing Women and Children First. And the first needle drop he dropped, he goes, check this out. Actually, no, before that, we're listening to Jay Giles' band and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I like this. I really like this. Freeze frame. Yeah. I'm like, wow, this is really, really cool. And Tom Petty as well, too.
Sure.
That same day, and I never even discussed this recently, I'm just remembering it, and I have a bad memory, but it's all coming back to me. So it was Jay Giles and Tom Petty, and I really liked it. And then popped on In the Cradle Will Rock. That was my first introduction to Van Halen. I don't know where I was under a rock before then. Now, fast forward many, many years, In the Cradle Will Rock is probably, I put it on my list of Van Halen songs, probably the very least favorite of mine today.
Really?
But it holds a special place because that was my gateway to Van Halen.
To be honest, what's funny is because I was young and I'd heard the Van Halen 1 and 2 records in some sort of like somebody's basement or somebody's thing, and was obviously knocked out by it. But the first Van Halen record I ever went and said, I'm going to buy this record. Every weekend I would take my like $5 allowance or whatever my parents gave me, and I would like mow a lawn or something to come up with the extra. I don't remember how much records were back then.
Cheap.
But I bought Women and Children First, and to this day, Women and Children First is my favorite Van Halen album.
Isn't that cool?
Because it's the one that I had, and I put it on my record player, and I dropped the needle myself. And when I heard that opening of The Cradle Will Rock, it was a pretty transcendent, life-changing moment, because in the same way I did the same thing with Whole Lot of Love, on Led Zeppelin 2, which is my favorite Led Zeppelin album for the very same reason. When I first heard that, like the riff, be it Whole Lot of Love or The Cradle Will Rock, it was like I've never heard anything like this. It was like, whoa. And it was like, and I think that that's what's so cool about Women and Children First is there's sort of it's a very uncommercial record in a funny way. It's really raw and heavy sounding in its way. And I think that's what's always kind of stuck with me. So that when you have things like this could be magic or could this be magic, stuff like that, it would just blow my mind. Like that I was hearing Cradle Will Rock or like Romeo's Delight or these heavier things, and all of a sudden they then they would bust into these kind of like or the opening of Take Your Whiskey Home and stuff like that. Wow. I mean, like I remember my dad thought all the music I was listening to was garbage, because it was all loud, noisy. Sure. He was an outlaw country guy. He was always knocked out by like somebody who could shred on the banjo or like a Roy Clark. Yeah, that kind of guitar playing to this day is
Chet Atkins, maybe Chet Atkins.
Yeah, like watching guys just shred on an acoustic or on a clean electric is mind blowing. But I remember listening to Van Halen 2 because I did that thing where you buy Women and Children first, and then you buy the entire fucking catalog because you're holy shit, And I remember playing Spanish Fly, just sitting in my, because it was my dad's stereo essentially. So I was listening to it, and he goes, "What is this?" I go, "It's Van Halen." And he goes, "This is very good." Like I remember him being kind of knocked out, and but I don't think he appreciated whatever the next song is after Spanish Fly. Sure. I can't remember which one it is next, but I'm sure it was like not interested. But that Spanish Fly thing was an example of like what you're listening to is all garbage except this guy who's playing guitar right now. That guy's got something special,
That's really cool, though, that caught his attention because it was unorthodox, for what you're listening to, nylon string guitar, and he's like, whoa, what's this?
Totally, yeah. I mean, well, he's not going to hear that in, I don't know.
Probably ever again.
Yeah, like a Twisted Sister record or whatever else I was listening to as a kid, I'm sure he would just not have fully not understood. That's what I mean? Right. It's like we're kids, we're listening to the loudest rock and roll in the world, and it's funny because I always think like my parents just don't get it, man. This music, they don't understand our music. And I go, no, I think they just thought it was a bunch of nonsense. You know what I mean? And I think in the same way that my friends now, they all complain about like young people's music now, and I just look at them and I go, dude, you sound like my dad.
I know.
You are your dad now because you don't understand young people's music. We're not supposed to understand young people's music, but you just it serves you no purpose in saying, the music of today is, and I go, this is the same sentence that has been said every 20 years by a new generation of adults. Yeah, you're like, I get it.
I'll share a funny story about the young generation of music in a second, but I'll tell you one other thing. I'm not sure how much you were into video games as a kid, but video games were, I came in through the Atari and the ColecoVision and stuff like that. And obviously we got spoiled as we got older with all this cool technology. But back in the day, we'd have these video games, we'd play them, and then, we thought they were thinking back in history, we thought those were the coolest things ever. And then now we come up to modern technology where we have these emulators and things where we can relive our childhood and play those old games. And sometimes the ones that we thought were the best were the best. Other times you're like, wow, this is hard. I enjoyed this game back then, but I'm relating that to a Van Halen record. Now, so I got a nice turntable a while back, nice subwoofer and all that kind of nice stuff out in the living room there. And my son Eric Jr., who's a really nice, gifted musician, he's 13. Right. And so we started to rediscover vinyl. Got some Frank Zappa, and some Van Halen, some Pink Floyd, stuff like that. We got probably 3 or 4 Van Halen records. And I popped on 84. I just happen to be wearing a T-shirt right now. But we popped on 84, and the minute I dropped that needle, and I'm trying to describe to him back in the day, we'd look at these albums, we'd read the liner notes, and it would almost, even though there's probably 600 words on a liner note, it would take you the entire album to read it because you're just in the moment. And I had my whole life flash before my eyes, and it was all good. And I did have tears in my eyes because it brought me back instantly like a time machine. It was like a DeLorean with a needle.
That's great.
It was very, very cool.
That's been the most fun about this rediscovery of vinyl. I've got all my childhood vinyl still, at least a good chunk of it. Some of it, you lose things over the course of multiple moves. But it's always great. What's always interesting about, like, when you say about the video games is there's records you go back to, not Van Halen necessarily, but there are records I go back to and go, I used to really love this record, and it's not very good. Or some band that that you like really like this record, and you go, well, now I understand that this was like something that didn't last or didn't stand the test of time. But I mean, that's what's great about youth, And then there are records that no matter how many times I have played A Whole Lot of Love, and I don't want to ever play A Whole Lot of Love again, because it's like one of those songs where it's like, I have played it in every sort of, like, a guy gets up on stage and it's, hey, do you know A Whole Lot of Love? Of course I know A Whole Lot of Love. I've been playing it since I was 12 in the band. So, and we would always jam it. But I'll say this about a few songs, like, but whenever I hear A Whole Lot of Love on the radio, I just am knocked out by the power of that for some reason.
It's hard to tune a channel, isn't it?
It's crazy. Like, I'm like, I don't ever want to play this song. And then, like, certain like Stones songs, I'm always kind of like, I don't need to ever hear Satisfaction or Jumpin' Jack Flash or Sympathy for the Devil, because I've always been playing those in fun situations. But whenever I hear the real versions, I'm always transfixed by, like, how special those recordings are. And I always try to, like, listen to, like, All Along the Watchtower or Purple Haze or anything like that and think to myself, now let's think about this in terms of, like, this song just came out yesterday, like, like, this didn't exist. And I go, man, like, Hendrix must have just blown everybody's brains out, because it must have just been like, where did this come from?
I know.
What I mean? Because still to this day, I think there are kids putting records on, like, or hearing songs like that and going, like, whoa, what is this? And I think that's the cool thing about music to me is I'm almost jealous, because when I was a kid and when I started heading down those rabbit holes, Rolling Stones, take your pick, it's like I discovered the Who and the Stones. My parents were already into the Beatles, and it felt like it was a never-ending journey of finding, like, I'd go to an aunt and uncle's house and they'd be like, oh yeah, there's some old records there, you can take those, because they got, like, cassettes or something, but I don't even know. They would just be like, and I'd be like, are you kidding? You're just going to give me Abbey Road?
Nice.
And, like, the Guess Who, American Woman, and, like, all these.
Man.
And I would go home and it would just be like, I couldn't believe, like, I was just coming across this stuff. So to be a kid in 2019 and go, okay, here, son, this is Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones. Like, it's just like, I just can't imagine what kind of a gateway drug that would be, to be like, okay, now let's go out and buy all the rest of the Stones records, because they're all going to be a journey unto themselves. And the same with every other band, Van Halen, any band you can think of. It's all. So I did that with almost every band, because by the time we were old enough to be into their records, John Bonham was already gone. Keith Moon was already gone. So it was like their best music was already just laid out for you to go out to the record store every once a week and buy a new record. The Beatles, all that stuff was like, and that's why it has such a heavy place in my heart still. Is we go to we live in Vegas now, and we go to that show, the Beatles Love Show at the Mirage, the Cirque du Soleil show, and it slays us. Me and my friends will be there weeping like children, because it's like that music just means so much to us, and to watch it in such a emotional presentation is just, it's just. But that's music is like that for me. It's just like it holds everything for me.
I hear you 100%. That's one thing I like about licensing, whether it becomes whether it be video games or movies, TV shows, and now with these things like the Netflix and all these subscription services where you can just binge watch content. And all these tunes are in there. Like Junior and I are watching Stranger Things right now, and I am just like a kid on a candy store, like Devo, Whip It, and I
Takes you right back.
Oh man, it's absolutely amazing. But when you talked earlier about the new generations of my dad's music or whatever, it's the opposite for me. So I have a 13-year-old, and I'm introduced to music. And I am just absolutely blessed, and I'm thankful that I have a little bit of an open mind. I don't have a very big open mind, but somewhat open-minded to at least discover new music. And I'm not afraid to say to him, no, I don't like that. But when a good song, no matter whether it's pop or outside of your wheelhouse, even if it's country or whatever, if it's a good song, you can't say no, that's a bad song. You're a hypocrite if you say it's a bad song. He's turned me on to artists. A few, I'll just mention a few right now. Billie Eilish, who I love to death. Oliver Tree. Look these up if you don't know Oliver Tree.
Sure.
Kind of, he wears like these big. When you think bell bottoms, picture bell bottoms times 100. These pants are like this wide, very colorful, but a great writer. Who else has he turned me on to? A couple others. Well, obviously, Gorillaz was major for me a couple years back. He turned me on to them, and it's like, you know what? Thank God for youth, because I think we can learn from that too. Instead of being like, no. There's good stuff out there. We just have to kind of be a little bit more open to it.
Well, it's always a bit foolish, isn't it? Because I have friends that get pissed off when Run DMC shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I go, dude, it's a different chapter of rock and roll in a much bigger book. I go,
yeah.
If you want to get into it, then we probably shouldn't have, I don't know, Van Halen shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because we should have cut the line at, like, I don't know, Little Richard and Chuck Berry and those guys, and that's rock and roll. And now here's the heavy metal category, and it's like, to me, it's like, I'm such a fan of music. Like, me and the guitar player in this band, we're always knocked out by, like, hearing a hip hop song and going like, that sample is from this old James Brown.
Yeah, you know it.
Thing, and you just watching people kind of become inspired by like a thing and turning it into something else. I would be so honored if someone took something I came up with and turned it into a modern hip hop or whatever song. I'd be like, wow, that was so rad that happened. But music is always going to be continually evolving, and it's been really interesting for us because we've been out on this tour for, the Living the Dream tour with Slash for almost a year,
mm-hmm.
and we have a lot of young bands opening for us at Joyous Wolf, Bishop Gun. Currently, we have a band called Dirty Honey, and they're all rock bands. They're all like 25-year-old kids who, like Greta Van Fleet or something like that, are just enamored with this kind of like, I'm like looking at the kid. He's got a '59 reissue Les Paul through a Marshall. It's just like, and they're like, and the singers are great. Like they're like no joke with like a great, high register vocal. And
mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, these guys are great. It's like, so it's interesting to see how like cyclical things can be. Like, it's not like one day it became like, they introduced like, I don't know, take your pick, Limp Bizkit or Linkin Park
mm-hmm.
or whatever with modern, things to it, DJs and loops and
yep. Samples and stuff.
I still think it's interesting to see a kid pick up a guitar, plug it into a Marshall amp, and just watch his entire world change.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that will never go away. Frankly, I think that I'll be a grandfather or a great grandfather, and on my deathband, and there'll still be a new band where a kid will come along and go like, check this out, whang,
exactly.
And I think that kind of power, that we all know what that power is. We all know how transcendent that is. That will never go away, I don't think.
I agree. That's why I've always admired people like Slash, for example. I mean, I know Slash has, we've seen his rig rundown and stuff like that as well, too. We'll talk about your rig in a little bit, too, here. But, I mean, he has a lot of outboard gear. But Slash is a guy that can run a Les Paul into a Marshall and just freaking wail. And a lot of people out there, and myself included, I need to have my comfort. Like, it's like my comfort food. I need my comfort effects. I need some reverb and delays, and I need to kind of sometimes hide behind some things. And yes, I can play without it, but I really, really like to have that. And when you see like the Greta Van Fleets and, these other bands like you're talking about, Rival Sons, another good example.
Yeah.
There's so many, and I know Miles is a big fan of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you as well too. I mean, it's really, really cool. It's almost like it's a time machine again. It's like new vintage rock, and they're using all the amps and the guitars, to kind of capture that thing. And it is very, very cool and time to have that. But I have utmost respect for people that can plug into an amplifier and just wail. It does take talent.
It does. I mean, I didn't realize the impact that a band like AC/DC had on me.
Yes.
I've always loved AC/DC, but that's like saying, I love pizza.
Yeah, of course.
Like, it seems like everybody loves pizza. What the hell are you talking about? You're not taking some sort of weird political stance on saying you love pizza. But I think that there's so much unsaid about AC/DC as far as like when you watch the rig rundown, there's no rocket science going on. It's like, well, there's some Marshalls that are like, they may be modded out to some degree, but they are Marshalls, and you'll look at like 3 SGs in a vault where Slash has like 10, or whatever. In the Guns N' Roses thing, I think he has like 18 or something like that. Joe Perry or Rich Robinson or any of those guys with multiple tunings, they have like 20 guitars on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Angus has 3 SGs, and it's like one for this, one in case he breaks a string, and then just a third wild card one in case both of them for some reason go crazy. And I'm like, there's something really special to be said about, like, I take this guitar, I plug it in, or my wireless or whatever, and that's it. Like, the Malcolm Young one is my favorite because it's like literally a guitar that's been gutted down to its most basic. Yeah, like down to one pickup, and it's literally just plug it in and go. And there's something very specific and special about Malcolm's job, so it's not for everybody. But there's very few tones that knock me out as much as Malcolm's tone. Like that, just like that raw, great tone, and that's kind of more where I come from, to be honest. I think I grew up on, as much as I loved like hard rock and some metal and all that kind of stuff, I definitely was in this punk rock world where it was sort of like there was a whole example of like, you don't need to know all that, dude. Take this guitar. We know these 3 chords. Let's go play a show. And you go, okay, and I was really knocked out by the energy of that kind of idea of like, and I think that freaked out a lot of people, where it's kind of like, if you love Rush, you're not going to understand the New York Dolls. Where I was the kind of guy where I could go, I love Rush. I love the New York Dolls. Yep. I love Kiss. I love Van Halen. I love the Ramones, but I also love, and so to me it was kind of like, it was fun being from a small town like yourself, because I grew up in a small town, first in northern Manitoba and then eventually back in Saskatchewan, and there was too small to really have what's cool and what's not cool. You just liked what you liked. So one day it could be like, this ZZ Top band, ZZ Top's really cool, and then like the next day it's like, hey, I really like this, whatever else is next, and it would be kind of more based on a to some degree a song by song basis, because you can like a song by one band and not necessarily get their whole vibe. And so to me it was kind of like, and then you take all that stuff and all these little things sort of trickle into your being, and they become what you do and your sound and your little toolbox that you reach into when it's time to kind of sprinkle your little thing on the pizza.
Agreed. Well, I look at you in a lot of cases. One thing I've learned about the business that was kind of just eye-opening for me one time, I've had Steve Stevens on the show a few times, and I really respect Steve Stevens as a guitar player. I mean, as a young teen, some of the crazy stuff he was doing with Billy Idol, and just everything. Like he was a guitar hero with tricks and all the things up his sleeve. And you look at him, and the reason why he's had the success that he has still with Billy and greatly admired by Billy is the fact that he likes to be the sideman. He's even said that. He's like, and not, he doesn't even really, I don't think he thinks of himself as a sideman. He does his job. He's over here. He can contribute like no other, but never steps over things. And you're doing that a lot. I mean, you're playing with Slash. I mean, contributing major parts. The rhythm section that you have, obviously with Brent. I mean, you guys know each other so very well. I mean, I'm sure you have like a right brain, left brain connection, whatever going on there. But I mean, you connect with that. Slash gets to do his thing, and as much as Slash is an incredible artist, his band also contributes a lot to that. And I mean, a lot of you guys in the band, Brent and Frank, of course, contribute a lot to that. So it's really cool that you can do that, give him his spotlight without taking over it, but at the same time, it'd be a different band without you too.
Well, that's the interesting thing about Slash, is that I think that Slash never had any intention of being a solo artist per se. I mean, it's not like he's, I don't know, like like a Joe Satriani who would make nothing but sort of like more instrumental type guitar records. That was no interest to Slash. And I think Slash really loves being in a band. I mean, I can say that because I know he loves being in a band. And even though this thing sort of, for all intents and purposes, acts as a sort of solo vehicle, it's very much a band. And the fact that, when we started kind of like to do stuff, and the first thing we actually, because in 2010, myself and Brent started playing with him in support of his first solo record. Miles was on it, Chris Cornell was on it, Kid Rock, Ozzy, the list goes on. So Miles was going to be singing, and we were going to tour and support the album. And then the first thing we kind of did as a group was a live DVD live album that came out that we recorded in Stoke-on-Trent outside of London, where Slash kind of initially grew up, and so it was kind of a throwback to that. And then it's like, let's do a band photo. And I'm like, oh, okay. I kind of always looked at it like this is Slash's thing. At the time, what's always funny to me is that I didn't know if we were just going to do like some flyouts and some appearances and support this thing, and it'd be like high five, good game.
Yeah, we're
nice
done.
And I go back to my life. But now it's almost 10 years later, and we're still doing this. But so yeah, I think that he really likes, he likes the comfort of being able to kind of have guys to throw ideas at, and the reality is it is his band, you know what I mean, and then he has Miles there to kind of handle lyrics and melodies and things that Slash is just not interested in. Not that he's not interested in doing it, but he's just kind of like that's not what he does. Every riff that Slash comes up with is like this iconic Slash riff. It's like it just falls out of him every day. He comes to sound check and goes, plays some riff, and you go, dude, that is so Slash. It's not even funny. But it's been an amazing experience watching the whole thing kind of slowly materialize into essentially a band. You know what I mean? It's interesting because it is a project as well, because we're right now sort of wrapping up the final part of 8 shows over the course of 2 weeks. And so we will all go off in different directions. Slash is off to do Guns N' Roses. Miles is off to do Alter Bridge. And then there's no sort of like, I don't know that there's going to be like a calendar that says, and then on this day, we all get back together, and it's just sort of like, we just all kind of wander off, and
phone call may come in or a text message may come in. Hey, what are you doing?
It very assuredly probably will. And I just don't kind of. I've always sort of been in the mindset that like I've always sort of felt like in 2011 it was going to be like wrapped up, and then all of a sudden, we're going to do another record. We're going to do it together as a band. Oh, okay. And then in 2012 we did Apocalyptic Love, and then after that I thought, okay, well, that was, now what, and then, we're doing another one, and then another one, it's sort of like, so every time was sort of like, not necessarily a surprise, but not, at the same time, not necessarily a given, it was kind of like always sort of like, Miles always remained being the lead singer from of Alter Bridge, and that was clearly never going to change to us. None of us wanted that to change. That's his thing. That's what he does. He's amazing at that, and they have an amazing career, and they're an amazing band, and they're amazing guys. So to me, it's kind of like, that's what's kind of fun about this thing, is it's kind of like you can be a fan of Miles Kennedy, and there's so much you can get to see him do now. He's doing Alter Bridge, which everybody already knows. He does a solo album that is fantastic, and then he comes out with us and he does another thing it's sort of like these different flavors of what Miles can do. And the same thing goes for Slash. It's kind of like in the advent of the Living the Dream tour, of this current tour that we started out on, he was sort of like, yeah, let's just play our own music. The one thing I always admire about Slash is how bold he is. Right. He never has this sort of feeling of like, we have to do Sweet Child of Mine, we have to do Welcome to the Jungle, we have to do Velvet Revolver. He's like, no, he just wants to do what he wants to do. And he's sort of like, you'd be hard-pressed to tell him otherwise. It's just like, that's the way he's going to roll. And if you want to hear all the Guns N' Roses song, well, there's a band called Guns N' Roses, and they come around, and you'll see all that there.
That's right.
And who's going to do it better than those guys, frankly? It's like, so to me, it's kind of like we managed to build an audience for ourselves, and it's stronger than ever. We're tighter than ever. The one thing I will say is when I walk off stage with that band, I go, oh, that was we are a solid band. Like, I always feel pretty proud of that.
10 years will do that to you.
10 years will do that to you.
That's right. Well, it's nice too. The discography that Slash has now, like together with you guys. I mean, he doesn't need to do the Sweet Child of Mine. I mean, as you said too, because we're going to be picking up in about, I think it's August 13th. Is that the last show as Slash solo?
Yes. We end off in Orlando, Florida.
And then he's taking off with Guns N' Roses. Now, are they doing a North American / world tour, or?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I really haven't.
I think it's North American right now.
You could ask me about a great many things. I'm sort of like lost on the road. It's like being in outer space, frankly. It's kind of like, I literally say to my wife, like, it's like I'm back on terra firma when I go home. It's kind of like, everything's changed. There'll be a new store up on the street. Like, when did this come
from? I know. It's been there for 2 years.
Yeah, I feel like I've only been gone like 5 minutes, but somehow everything's changed.
I know.
But I don't really know exactly what those guys are doing. But and then there's talk about guns. I mean, I don't know any of the information, so I know that there's been rumors of recording and stuff for those guys. And
that's cool.
And so I'm like, but the thing is, I'm a fan. I've always been a Guns N' Roses fan. So when it came up for Slash, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Of course you have to do that." It's like that's the history of rock and roll moment. It's like, and to be that close to it, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be that close to the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin or Van Halen or Aerosmith, but I'm that close to Guns N' Roses' reformation. Is that Slash is a pal of mine, and and it's like it came up that they got to go out and do one of the highest grossing tours of all time because of it, and it's I got to see it on a number of occasions, and it's like I say, I'm a fan. I really enjoy all of that, but I'm a fan of everybody in this band. It's like I think Frank Sidoris, our other guitar player, is one of the most talented people I know. I can't wait for people to find out how talented he really is once he sort of gets a chance to stretch out a bit. I think Brent Fitz is one of the most underrated musicians I know. So, and Miles Kennedy is proven to be and will continue to prove to be a force to be reckoned with till long after I've given up.
Absolutely insane. That guy's pipes and guitar playing as well too.
Yeah, honestly, everybody forgets how good a guitar player that guy is.
I know. Well, you're next to Slash, right?
Oh shit, I forgot. Yeah.
I know. I'm going to jump over to the chat and say hi to a bunch of people because I've totally neglected the chat. And when we come back, I want to talk about one of your buddies actually over in Toque, Cory Churko, who was on our show a couple weeks back in Helix. I want to talk about his involvement with you on a bit of a leg over in the European tour. So over in the chat, I missed a bunch of people. I'm so very sorry. And I can't even scroll back far enough. But Lars Guitar is here. Guitarded is here. Brad Miller is here. Ladybug is here. Bucket Full of Balls. I love saying that name. It's just so very, very cool. Harmony is here. Luke Rizzo. Johnny Rock, Dave R's Guitars, Mark Taylor is here. Guitar Hack. And Guitar Hack had a question earlier, and I remembered this one, even though I can't see it. He asked about you played with Bruce Kulick on the Kiss Cruise. Is that correct?
That is correct. We did the last 2 Kiss Cruises, and we're doing the next Kiss Cruise.
Very cool.
Yeah, Bruce is an old... I mean, this is the cool thing about that is because when I was a kid, the first time I got to see Kiss, and I'm a massive Kiss fan. I mean, like it's like... the cool thing about Kiss is it's kind of like Star Trek. Like it's like we all know way too much about the band. We all like talk about really nerdy aspects about the band. But the first time I finally got to see Kiss was Bruce's first tour on Animalize.
Okay.
So my first introduction to Kiss live was with Bruce Kulick. So to all these years later, find myself on stage with the man is not lost on me. So I've known Bruce off and on through Brent Fitz, because Brent Fitz was in his post-Kiss band called Union with John from Motley Crue, John Corabi.
Yeah.
And so we've managed to do these Kiss Cruises together and hopefully more. I mean, we're doing the next Kiss Cruise, but we're always talking about doing a lot more than being able to do something more with it. Because I got to tell you, the band we put together, and we're doing mostly stuff from his era, which is largely overlooked, unfortunately. Not unfortunately at all. It's just kind of like Kiss has... I'm a Kiss fan, and I know that they have so much that they have to focus on as far as a set list goes, that all this stuff kind of falls by the wayside. So we get to go out and do all this stuff, and there's a massive audience for it. And especially on things like the Kiss Cruise, they go bananas. You cannot dig deep enough. Like anything that we play a song called Sword in the Stone, which was only a demo tape that Kiss recorded or Paul Stanley and Bruce put together. It was covered by other people, like Paul Dean from Loverboy had a solo album and things like that. And the fans just can't get enough that we actually dug that deep. We're playing demos. We're not even playing like old Kiss songs. We're playing like demo tapes and stuff like that. It's been a blast, and there will be more to come.
Well, that's very cool. I remember one time I embarrassed myself really bad at NAMM. It was one of those days where I think it was day 3 of NAMM, Winter NAMM, and I was just like brain dead. Tommy Thayer walks around the corner and like literally 5 feet apart. I'm like, Bruce, and I just oh man, and he looked at me too, and I think he even did one of these. And I was like, no, I don't think too many people saw it, so it's one of those things where now everybody knows it, but not too many people knew at the time. But I was very embarrassed. But it is what it is. I'm gonna go backwards in the chat just to say hi to a bunch of people. Gary Holt is here right now, and he says he's hitting the next Kiss Cruise. Blackie is here. Gary Tholander, Soda. Midnight Nightmare. Kiss was my favorite band as a 4-year-old. Ace Frehley got me into guitar. Six String Brian says great show as always, Eric. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Soda's here. Michelle South sends a super chat, says thanks for this live stream. A Conspirators album needs to happen. Terry Himes is here. Going to go backwards here a little bit more. Michelle South. Okay, I mentioned that. Yep, Blackie. I'm just trying to see any names I might have missed. I do have a note that Gary Kramer is watching tonight as well, too, from Kramer Guitars. It's very, very cool.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Very nice, Gary. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate that. I apologize for anybody I may have missed. Let's go back. Joe Hervey is here as well, too. Lou 89, Whole Lot of Love riff is iconic, but not nearly among my favorite Zepp riffs. Yeah, everyone has a favorite for sure, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's right. Mark Taylor and Tactical Six String is here. Thank you so much for tuning in with us this evening. And I have to admit, I am the worst person when it comes to the chat. I try very hard, but it is hard. And at least the nice thing is we'll see your names as the replay goes on here. Ron Limber is here as well, too. Loot 89, Butterfly and Ladybug Show. She looks after our chat efficiently every single week. She's sharing a lot of your links in that as well, too. And we have a lot of your links to your social media profiles, your website, and everything down below, where they can get your merchandise and everything, too. James Severin is here. Ladybug is here. Kaylin Provogue. Apparently the Trues are on, another great Canadian band.
Oh, cool.
They play in this area all the time and never seem to not sell out. Deke Williamson is here. Conspirators Italia is here. Very, very nice. Great. Cool. Tommy Carmichael. Let me see. You are the man. You should start a band with Bruce Kulick. That's very cool. I could see that having some good vibes to it.
Well, we already have.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Yeah, Bruce is great, man. Blackie, I think I'm trying to see if I miss anybody else. Kim Colucci says, saying hi to someone else here as well, too. I'm just going to continue on here. And I apologize if I miss anyone. Harmony, I'm going to stop there just for a moment. I want to come back and talk about Cory Churko. So he's your bandmate in Toque, obviously on the Canadian side here, but which was really, really cool. And this was really funny. We had this conversation, Cory and I, and he said to me, he says, I've never felt more guilty about, being excited about an opportunity. And I understand where he was coming from on this. Frank had to step away for a short bit there, and you can elaborate as much or as little as you want to say on that. But he had to step away for a little bit. And I'm just assuming that maybe you might have said to Slash, hey, I got the kid for you that can help us out on guitar. Yeah. But Cory joined you on the European leg of the Slash tour. First of all, it must have been amazing for you and Brent, having 3/4 of Toque, with Slash. But how did that all come about, and what was it like working with your buddy over on the European side?
Well, this is the funny thing about it, is it, it came up. Frank's wife is going through chemo and whatnot, and she's a warrior princess, I call her. I was just with them today. We went to the Prince thing together. So she's doing great, and she's as strong as an ox. God love her. She's too young to be dealing with this stuff. But and Frank is the funny thing about Frank is he's like in many ways my closest friend out here. Even though Brent and I are more like brothers. Like it's funny to consider him a friend when I'm kind of like, yeah, well, that's a given. I've known the man for. I don't even know how long we've known each other. We don't even really know officially when we met. We just always kind of known each other. But I think the world of Frank. I think he's like I said, he's one of the most talented people I know, and people are going to start figuring that out as he steps away from over the next couple of years when he's away from when he's not a conspirator, when he doesn't have his conspirator hat on. But the funny thing is this, that Cory. I'll quickly just deal with how he became involved in this, and then I can go backwards to how long I've known Cory. But the funny thing is that it sort of came up that Frank, might have to be going home or might need to take a break and that kind of stuff. So before it was even in my mind established that was happening 100%, Slash came to us and said, what about that guy from Toque?
Wow.
And it was both me and Brent looked at each other like, okay. The fascinating thing is this, because Slash is an amazing dude in so many ways, and he's so much more like, and he's not more, I was going to say he's more thoughtful, but that's not quite the right words. He's more mindful of what's going on around him than anybody ever gives him credit for, because his world is, his world is a big, fast moving world. You know what I mean? And we gave him this Toque CD when we first finished it, which is a project that myself, Brent, and Cory, with our friend Shane, made. It's all, because we all grew up in Canada, they're all old Canadian classics. And the intention was like recording bands like Street Heart and The Orphan, and all kinds of bands. There were sort of more popular songs like April Wine or Loverboy and things like that as well. But we there's so many songs that we grew up with on the prairies that we loved so much that wouldn't it be cool to record these? And we just started messing around. Cory's an amazing producer, an amazing mixer, an amazing editor and everything else, that we just started doing these things. And they were just so much fun that we ended up doing like a batch of them and then said, now it's a record, now it's a thing. And then all of a sudden we were doing things like charity shows and benefit shows, and we always we would do them in Winnipeg, and we would do them in Saskatchewan, and we would always sort of, if we're going to play in those places, let's play all Canadian music, because that'd be fun, just kind of give it some kind of like interesting twist. And then the next thing you know, it turned into a thing, and it's great, and it spawned a second one, which is coming at the end of the month as well. But I gave Slash the CD, and hey, listen to this in the truck sometime, if you're in the car sometime when you're, and he goes, okay. And I'm never sure, like with a guy like him, because he's got a million things going on, that might just go into the glove box and
never see it again.
Like, yeah, when he sells the car, it's like they just bought themselves a car with a Toque CD. But he actually was texting me later that night. He goes, "Is this Fantasy by Aldanova,
or is this you guys?"
Like he knew some of the songs, and
Sure.
I go, "Yeah, dude, that's the old Aldanova song as covered by Toque." And he was like, really complimentary and loved the way it sounded. He said the guitar player is great. Like, it's funny because, he's just being a musician and a guitar player and just commenting on that stuff. And then Cory just sort of, the other thing is that Cory kind of lives very close to our studio, the Snake Pit, where Slash, we recorded the last record there in Los Angeles. Cory lives down in that, literally like a block and a half, 2 blocks away from where this is. So this circle just kind of became tighter and tighter.
Yep.
To the point that I think when this happened, even though I think that a lot of guitar players ran through Slash's Rolodex, about like people, I think he just looked at, took a step back, looked at the, Miles, Todd, Brent. Hey, Todd and Brent play in that thing with that guy that I think is, what about your guy from Toque? It doesn't mean that if we had said, oh, Cory's out with Shania Twain right now, we can't get him, we wouldn't have had to chase somebody else down.
Yeah.
But the funniest thing about it is me and Brent both laughed at that suggestion. Not that we wouldn't have thought of Cory if it had been presented to us. It came from Slash. Like, Slash was the one who said, well, what about that guy? And I was like, and as soon as he said it, I was like, well, you're not going to find anybody who's going to be A, more qualified, and B, what I said was like, it'll probably be almost seamless because Cory is such a professional that I wanted it more than anything as a member of the band to be like, you're playing the show and you'll forget that Frank Sidoris is not here.
That's right.
And that's not a testament one way or the other, because Cory is such a he's such a unique player, and he now I can go backwards to knowing Cory. I've known Cory since he was like 14 years old.
Wow.
So I was like, I think I'm 3 or 4 years older than he is. But he played in a family band.
Yeah, all the members in the family.
The whole family.
Yeah.
Mom played bass. Dad was the rhythm guitar player, singer. Kevin, his brother, who was a very famous producer, Five Finger Death Punch, In This Moment, Disturbed, a lot of bands. His sister played keyboards, and Cory was this kid who was playing the Crazy Train solo and Jump solo at 14 years old. And we were like, who is this kid, man? And it just blew our minds because he was like a little dude. Like, he looked like a kid,
Yeah.
And then, we've always stayed in contact. And then we would lose each other along the way because life is fast moving. And I had I joined and started a band, and we toured and did stuff. And then we both ended up in Vancouver at one point. And this is a funny story too, because one day I'm down in English Bay, the beach down in the west end of Vancouver, and I'm just sitting on the beach drinking coffee, and my girlfriend at the time goes, "Is that Cory Churko playing the fiddle down there?" Like, there was a guy busking on the beach playing fiddle. And I go, I go, Cory Churko doesn't play fiddle. What are you talking about? Like, I hadn't seen him in a year, maybe 2 years at this point. So then she walks down the beach to go get a ice cream cone or something and comes back and goes, that's Cory Churko. I go, what? That guy's shredding like, Devil Went Down to Georgia and stuff like that. He wasn't just like up there going, hee, 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 hee. He was like shredding. And then all of a sudden I'm like, no way. I go over and I go, what the hell's going on? It would be like sort of like, it'd be like somebody who's not music at all suddenly being like a concert pianist. I was just like, what is this? And then we reconnected, and we've reconnected and lost each other because the touring life is such that you lose track of each other.
Sure.
Cory got the gig. The funny thing is, I told this to Shania Twain when we were in Montreux recently in Switzerland. I said, you know who played him Shania Twain for the first time? Me. I go, I had the record The Woman in Me. Somebody like, check this out. It's a country record. Mutt Lange produced it. And I remember being kind of like, this is really crazy. Like, I think this could be huge. And I played it for Cory, who grew up in country music. His family band was kind of like a country band.
Sure.
So there was a sort of like roots in sort of like, I suppose, traditional country. You know what I mean? And I think anybody that was into traditional country was a little bit freaked out by this Mutt Lange, Def Leppard, AC/DC producer coming in and making a country record. You know what I mean? And I remember him being kind of like, like a little bit kind of like taken aback by like, well, it's pretty crazy, And then 2 years later, when they were when she was going out to do I think it was Come On Over or whatever the album was called, they were looking for people. And I remember he called me. He goes, I just got a call from somebody asking me if I want to try out for Shania Twain. And I go, you got to do that, dude. By this point, Shania was massive artist. And I go, well, you gotta. He had pretty much retired from music. He had gotten into computer animation and stuff, and he actually had like a little thing going on. Like he was working on a show or something like that in Vancouver. And I go, well, you gotta at least check it out. And long story short, he's been playing with Shania for almost 20 years now. So he moved to LA. We lost track of each other, as you do. I mean, we would kind of reconnect here and there when I would be in LA and and all that kind of stuff. And then a few years later, I found myself down in the States doing my thing, and then I got the Slash gig, and then I found myself in LA all the time, and then we ended up in each other's pockets again. So it's a really funny thing.
Full circle.
The way that these things have always kind of gone along. It's a similar story with Brent Fitz, because Brent Fitz and I have known each other just from playing in bands back when we were both playing the club circuit back in the prairies and all that kind of stuff. But I would never say we really knew each other really well. We just kind of knew each other. But the Age of Electric played in LA. He came down. I would run into him just, because he moved to LA as well. He's another one of those guys who just went down there to find fame and fortune.
Sure.
And whenever I went to LA, I'd see Brent Fitz, and that's how I ended up in Slash's band, because Brent got the gig.
Okay.
Brent got the gig with Slash. There was already a lineup in place, and the bass player didn't work out. And I got that phone call. I've told this story many times. I was looking at houses. That's how well I was doing in the States already. I was like, I'm going to buy a house.
Okay.
And I brought my father down because he's a grown up and understands these things. And I was kind of like, I'm going to go look to buy a house, and I'm sitting at a Chili's after looking at some houses, and I think I kind of decided on the one that we were going to get, and then I get this phone call from Brent, and I go, let me just take this really quickly. He goes, hey, do you think you could be in Hollywood by noon tomorrow? And I go, yeah, okay. It was never put to me like this is an audition.
Right,
or
what is it kind of thing?
It was just kind of like, come jam. And I'm like, if you know me well enough, I can jam. Like, it's like, I know, for some reason I still have like a million old songs in my head, and I can get through pretty much all of them. You know what I mean? And I was like, of course. The Appetite for Destruction record is part of my DNA. It's like one of those records that was like, in the same way that we talk about all those other records we were talking about that changed your life, Appetite had a similar effect on me. And so I went down there the next day, and here I am. Almost 10 years later, here I am. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I'm also very happy. I'm happy for you, but I'm also happy for Cory too. I mean, the fact that he's accomplished many, many things, but to hear from Slash that, oh yeah, that guitar player and your guitar player there and Toque is pretty good. That's got to be a pretty cool moment for him. And I know he's professional enough to like accept it and channel it. But I mean, very, very cool. In our last
Slash is a renowned legend who stopped and went like, that guy's a good guitar player.
I know. I can't even imagine that. I really can't. But I mean, kudos to him. I mean, just absolutely amazing. In our last couple of minutes here, just the last few things I want to say here over in the chat. Blackie says, tell Todd I'll see them Wednesday at Sweetwater. Elizabeth Higgins saying, hey, Todd. Gary Holt as super chat. Thank you, Gary. Really appreciate that immensely. Kim Colucci says, Todd, my husband hasn't stopped playing the bass you gave us this week. See you tomorrow. Awesome.
Cool.
Very cool.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. Midnight's Nightmare. I got to get back into playing guitar. I've been playing bass for so long. And this is a question I had on the itinerary for tonight and a good way to end the evening. And I'll say hi to the last couple of people after the question. Soda asks, what's Todd's signature guitar? And this is what's the coolest thing. I have to say, this is the first time ever on this show in 3.5 years I've ever talked to an artist talking about a signature instrument where I can say, you have a signature guitar and a bass. That doesn't happen. Tell us about that.
Well, it's funny to me because, people always kind of get into this kind of weird, like, suspicious look on their face when they look at me and they go, are you a guitar player or are you a bass player? Like,
I'm a musician.
Like something has to be defined.
Yeah.
And I always say, well, I'm pretty much a musician. Like, I love rock and roll so much that if you said you needed a keyboard player, I'm not a great keyboard player, but I'll figure it out. Let's go do it. Let's jam.
That's right.
But when it comes to guitar playing and bass playing, I don't think that there's people kind of forget that Paul McCartney was the guitar player in the Beatles when they had a guy named Stu Sutcliffe playing bass, and then one day Stu wasn't there, and Paul went, okay, well, I'll play bass, and he went on to be like one of the most iconic bass players, probably in many ways the most iconic, at least the starting point of what a rock and roll bass player is. And I think, but again, Paul picks up a guitar during a solo show, and he's a great guitar player. So to me, it's always kind of like when it comes to guitars and basses and designing something, it's an interesting story because I came across Prestige guitars out of Vancouver who are friends of mine. Mm-hmm. Mike, the owner of the company, was he'd just been starting this company out. He had these really cool single cutaway hollow body with P90s in them. I thought it was really interesting combination. You don't usually see P90s in a semi hollow body.
Yeah.
Bigsby, real throwbacky kind of guitars, and I was like, wow, cool. And I bought one on the spot. I just thought it was cool. I plugged it in. It sounded killer. So I bought it right there and then. And then later on, like not long after, we designed a guitar together. It's still available from that company. And then when I started playing with Slash, I found myself in a position where I was like, there's elements of this instrument that I love, and I find this with guitars as well. Like there's things about that guitar that I really love, there's parts about that guitar I really love, and there's parts about that guitar I really love. Wouldn't it be great to get these all in one guitar?
Yeah.
Or the elements of like maybe without this or without that. And so the bass design happened first because I was a member of Slash's band, and I was that'd be great to have my own signature bass. And the bass is funny because it's so much more of a primal instrument as far as like in our show, there's never a moment where I need to bust out the upright fretless. Like, that's not a thing. It's a Slash show. It is loud. It is full on from song one to the end. Yeah, we have some slow songs, but the cool thing about that is that Slash is a guitar player who has a sound. You know what I mean? Like he has a thing. That's the way he sounds. And I think that that's kind of something that I kind of started to kind of like wanted to kind of have something that goes like, this is what I sound like, rather than having like an army of different things to reach for and like change my sound every 3 songs. I was like, no, this is what I sound like. So now when we make records, and I think ever since when we started making records together in 2012, Apocalyptic Love, World on Fire, and Living the Dream, the bass is very aggressive. It's very obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of, it's that John Entwistle, Lemmy, but with body to it. It's not just obnoxious. It actually it's very aggressive, but it's also got a lot of body there, and that's what I really love.
Has a nice voice.
Exactly, and I think it really sits well within the mix of all these other elements,
Mm-hmm.
And so when I designed the bass, it was a lot more like, I want these pickups to be wound as hot as they will wind them. So Seymour Duncan really, I mean, they in the description of the guitar, it's like they're Todd Kerns wound bass pickups because they're like Thunderbird style pickups,
mm-hmm.
but they're wound really hot and it's like it's in a single volume knob. That's it. I wanted it because in a live setting, I find it like it's like going to war. You know, you're like on stage, and so many things can go wrong.
Volume is tone.
Yeah, exactly. There's less things I have to go wrong, the better for me.
Sure.
So in a guitar situation, it's different because in a guitar, I have to have a boost. I have to have a clean channel. I have to have a phaser on this. So I have to have a chorus on that. So, but in bass, I was like, I did mess around with, if you listen to like Use Your Illusions era Guns, Duff really loved the chorus pedal or the phaser type kind of effect on that. And, you know, and I play around with that a little bit, but I always found myself going back to this sort of like, just this. I think this sounds more like me. This sounds more like what I would do. So I have a single volume knob and literally a kill switch on the bass. So it's on and it's off, and there's very little room for me to make any mistake. It's one trick pony, but it's a hell of a trick. You know what I mean? And that's all I wanted it to be. And then we designed the 6-string version because Guns N' Roses got together. So I had this bass designed, and then it was like, oh, okay, so we'll get back to that. You know, when that presents itself, when the opportunity presents itself. In the meantime, we were like, well, let's design the 6-string version. And it turned out it's a simple design. It has elements of multiple guitars that I've always loved. I think the body is somewhat reminiscent but somewhat unique. And the pickup structure is such that it's, you know, it's a JB, it's a 59, it's real kind of meat and potatoes, you know. But the way I play guitar is I'm from that Malcolm Young, Angus school of like I want the guitar to sound good before I put anything on it.
Yes.
And for me, it was like, you know, we were thrilled with it, and then we did it at NAMM in 2017.
Okay.
We presented it. We won a Best of NAMM, or
Nice.
we were included in a Best of NAMM for the Anti-Star 6, and then Guitar World magazine gave us a platinum award for that guitar. So
congrats.
And it's one of those things where you're not reinventing the wheel.
No, not
but
at all.
We live in a day and age where, you know, there's always that kind of, you know, the ongoing fear that guitar music is dying. You know, no one's going to buy guitars anymore.
No, not true at all.
And I always kind of listen to this stuff and giggle because I heard that in the 80s. You know, when I was a kid, it was
sure.
It's gonna be all Devo and Depeche Mode now. It's all keyboards. It's like, no, it's not. What are you talking about? It's like there's room for everything, you know. And so we were really excited by that. I mean, it's a real, for a guy like me. While all my friends were out stealing girly magazines, I was drooling over guitar magazines.
Sure.
You know? I mean,
That's great experience.
And girly magazines, but
yeah, of course.
but you know, it was like I would just sit there and just be transfixed by, you know, just a Gibson ad or a Fender ad or any of the body styles that and guitar styles. I would just be like fascinated with, you know, and I'm still fascinated with guitars. I have a hard time saying no to almost anything that I walk into a store, pick up, and go, gang, and I go, damn. What is this? How much is this? Okay. And my wife is an enabler of enablers. I remember I walked into Guitar Center one day and played this one. I love this guitar. Played another one. I love this guitar. And she goes, well, why can't you just get both?
I have the same thing here. We share that in common. I have the same thing, and I love it. If I say I want to sell a guitar to get another one or something like that, she's right on me. It's like, no. Right. I went to a music store one day to put a deposit on a guitar for Junior for Christmas, and there was a PV Wolfgang sitting there. It was like a beam of light was shining on it, like, you know. Yeah. And I was not there looking for the guitar, and I come back. I said, oh yeah, you should have seen this Wolfgang who was sitting there. And she's like, why didn't you bring it home? I'm like, oh yeah. Well, you know, it's just one of those things. You know, we don't want to just necessarily jump on things without discussing, and that's kind of relationship we have. I love that. It's so cool.
Well, I think it's, you know, I mean, guitars aren't just utilitarian in a sense. I mean, sure, I play the guitars, but I also am a great lover of and appreciator of everything about the guitar, like the way it looks, the way it feels. You know, I feel good when I put, you know, like I'll be at my house and I'll move this one into the living room. You know, a Paul Stanley Iceman. You know, it's like in my living room, and I look at it and I go, "That is a cool ass guitar." The EVH, I got the EVH Red Frankenstein. Got
Nice.
that one out.
Nice.
Whatever I can get my hands on. I just love guitars. So, and they changed my mood. And again, as a bass player, I've got a number of different instruments as well. To me, it's kind of like I just think that they. I will never stop being enamored with guitars, and that's even now. I have ideas for a new design, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's been really, really great. Now that we're heading into a couple years of who knows what, and that's the kind of the most fun part about this project, the band / featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, is it sort of opens up this other side of things where I get to kind of go and do Toque and Bruce Kulick and Raiding the Rock Vault, and I've got plans for a solo thing. So it's kind of like it really opens up opportunities that I wouldn't get to do if I had to go right back into another. Even though I would perfectly happily go back into another Slash record, obviously, but it does really. I get to pick up different part of my brain, and I think that's really healthy sometimes.
I agree with that 100%. And just in case there's any people watching that aren't musicians, I'm sure there are a few that are just fans of you and things like that as well too. But to kind of give a bit of a layman's terminology when you're talking about having these different instruments around. So, sometimes we as, humans have comfort foods if we're having anxiety or depression or whatever. We want to go to our ice cream or our cakes, whatever. For us as musicians, it's nice to just grab a guitar or a bass or keep whatever it may be. And no matter how good your day was, how bad your day was, anywhere on that spectrum, grabbing that instrument is just, you let it go, and sometimes it channels into some songs. Other times it's just working through it, but there's nothing like picking up an instrument, to go through any emotion.
Well, I forget where that quote is from, where like the blues is a good man feeling bad, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I always like that thing because it can. Just yesterday, somebody was saying some sort of stat that they'd read where you can change your mood in like 7 seconds with the right song. And I do believe that as a person who loves music, you put the right song on and, I can be in a bad mood and that right song will just turn me around. It's just like, dude, this song, forget about it. It's like, off you go and you're not thinking about stuff anymore, And the guitar has the exact same effect. It's just that it's in your hands rather than Mick Jagger singing it for you. It's kind of like, you're just doing it yourself. Yeah.
And forget about the language. I mean, even if it's done in Italian, you can't understand a word, but you feel the music, you feel the melody. Absolutely. So it crosses all boundaries. We'll say hi to a last few people here throughout the last chat, and we'll wrap up. Mr. T is here, Michelle South, Mark Dillon is here, Ricky Mees is here, Griffin Guitar saying great show. Six Roses, I think it was. I missed the name. Rocket 09, Midnight's Nightmare. Just trying to see if I missed anybody else. Mitch Heyman, I think, is here as well too. Thank you so much, Mitch, for tuning in. As we conclude here, and I'll say goodbye to you off the air. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I think is it the 27th? You have your CD release party.
Yes, we're doing the 27th in Winnipeg at a place called Nashville's. Toque is playing. And then I think the 28th it will be officially available. So midnight. So basically the night, the 27th at midnight, it will be available to in whatever online fashion.
Fantastic.
In the world, yeah.
I am really surprised. I can't remember what I had for supper, let alone I remember that date because I looked before the show and I saw the dates because I knew Slash was wrapping up on the 13th and I knew you had some Toque dates. I'm really glad I remembered the right one, so that's good. So awesome.
Actually, when you say it like that, it just reminds me how crazy we are to go, you wrap up such a long tour where everybody just wants to go into a coma. It's like, no, let's go to Winnipeg, and then Regina, and then Calgary, and then we'll go home. So we're doing like some in-stores in there as well. We're doing like a music shop in Moose Jaw and Regina, plus a festival in in Regina, and then a festival in Calgary, and then we go home. So it's, to me, it's like, again, it's like, I'm one of those guys. It's like I can only sit on my couch so much. It's like, a gig, let's go play.
That's right. Well, listen, I hope it goes great for you. I know it will. It'll be fun just to kind of, get in the clubs and, connect with, your Canadian wallet. You're already playing with Brent and everything as it is. But, I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun for you. Some downtime. And, who knows what the future's going to bring. You got a great year ahead of you. So it's going to be awesome. But I want to really, really thank you for taking time with us on your day off today. It's been a great pleasure.
I always have a blast talking about music, especially with guys who love music as much as I do.
Exactly. Well, it's been a real pleasure, and please pass on my well wishes to the guys in Slash, Miles, Slash, Frank, everybody, and Brent, of course, and tell them I wish the best with the remainder of a few dates here, a couple weeks left on the tour, and Slash is going to have some fun going back with the GNR boys a few weeks from now as well too. I'm sure he'll do well, and we'll see what happens from there.
Totally. It's going to be a very exciting year, this 2020.
I think so. So listen, don't go away. I'm going to say goodbye to you off the air. And everyone, thank you so very, very much for tuning in this evening. We will be off over on the Helix Hour. This Sunday, we're off for 2 weeks, and we're back to Season 4 starting 2 weeks from now. But I want to thank you again for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend and safe out there. And thank you for tuning in. Check out all of the links we have down in the description down below for Todd. We've got his website. We have Twitter. We have YouTube. We have Instagram. We have the whole works. Check him out. Follow along. Send some love his way. And watch for things to come. So, Todd, we'll say goodbye to you off the air in just 1 sec. Everyone, talk to you very soon. Until next time. Cheers.
Hey, you're still here? Eric Jr. here, reminding you to check out our full lineup of quality merch. Available right now in the Broadstash Boutique. Quality products and fast shipping. Visit broadstash.com today.
I am now on Patreon. If you enjoy my content and wish to support my channel and what I do, then please check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/evhgeartv. Your support assures the continued growth of this channel and a fun community in which to share our love for Van Halen, music gear, and much more.
My name is Eric and I'm playing Wolfgang guitar.
Video production services provided by Design 39 Media. Visit design39media.com for all your website, photography, and video production needs. Microphones for EVH and Gear TV are provided by Rode Microphones, and official Van Halen merchandise is provided by VanHalenStore.com.